Welcome to Cyclone InCYders. I'm Taylor Mankle. Welcome by Mary Rominger and Zach Williamson to kick off this show. And we are going to be talking some softball and some football in this episode of Cyclone InCYders, breaking it down with a bunch of different analysts here to talk about it. And what better way to start than a couple recaps of the games that we had over the weekend. Iowa State hosted its first series and open Big 12 play at home at the Cyclone Sports Complex, starting on Friday and concluding on Sunday. Zach was there on Friday. Let's take a look at what went down.
It wasn't ideal weather here at the Cyclone Sports Complex. The rain and cold weather weren't enough to cancel the Big 12 season opener. The Cyclones were looking to extend their winning streak to 4 against the 13-14 Texas Tech Red Raiders. The temperature never got above 45 degrees, but that didn't stop the Red Raiders from starting off hot. The Red Raiders got on base early and never looked back, their first 2 runs coming off of illegal pitches by starting pitcher Brianna Wheelbaker. Then, Susan Wellborn hit a 2-run RBI double to give Texas Tech a 4-0 lead. After a few errors in the field and 6 more runs, Susan Wellborn hit her second RBI double of the first inning. Wellborn finished the game 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs. Batters later, Brittany Warnicki followed up with another double to give them their 13th run of the first inning. The Cyclones went through 3 pitchers in the inning and committed 3 errors. The Cyclones were retired in order in the bottom of the first, and then in the top of the second, Devin Tomei for Texas Tech hit a long shot to center field for her first career home run. Tomei finished 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs. Iowa State got on the board in the second, however, after Taylor Lewis walked and scored on a Kaylee Bosworth single. Then in the third, Lewis hit a 2-run double down the line and scored on a pinch hit RBI blooper from Kirsten Cotter. With the run scored, Lewis finished with 2 RBIs and 2 runs, accounting for all 4 Cyclone runs. The Cyclones finished strong, but they dug themselves into too big of a hole, as the final score was Texas Tech 18 and Iowa State 4.
It would have been easy to quit and just kind of feel bad, especially first time at home conference play, but we didn't. And I actually think using that moving forward, it'll actually make us better. I think just we got to clean up our defense, especially when the pitchers work hard and give us some easy outs and routine outs. Actually, you got to make some routine plays, and I thought we had them. We just didn't make them. But it definitely starts in the circle. We got to make sure we attack and obviously stay legal.
The Cyclones look to bounce back Saturday and Sunday in the final 2 games of this home series against the Texas Tech Red Raiders. For ISU TV, I'm Zach Williamson.
Great job, Zach. But before we break down that game, we're also going to look at Sunday's Game 1 of 2 doubleheader. Mary, she was at the Cyclone Sports Complex. Let's take a look. God, so much coverage. Oh, it's awesome.
In its first Big 12 matchup of the year in today's doubleheader against the Texas Tech Red Raiders.
After an 18-4 loss in Game 1 on Friday, Iowa State needed a strong defensive effort heading into Game 2. Brianna Wallbacher, who leads the Big 12 in strikeouts, started on the mound. Texas Tech was the first to score in the second inning and was able to carry their offensive stride in the top of the 5th, which included an Iowa State error that sent 3 Texas Tech runners to home plate. The Cyclones came out of the top of the 5th, trailing by 6, and would then have to enter the bottom of the 5th in desperation mode to get on the board. Freshman Taylin Lewis hit a line drive and was safe at first base courtesy of a Red Raider error. Rachel Hartman would then try to get Lewis home, but the fly ball was caught at center field and Iowa State wouldn't be able to get anything started. Emma Highland came in for Wallbacher, but wouldn't stay for long once the Red Raiders were in Grand Slam territory. Despite a pair of Iowa State runs leading up to the final inning, nothing beyond the 2 were generated. Mandy Moore would come in to close in her first appearance of the season to relieve Walbacher, who ended the game with 8 total strikeouts. But again, a Cyclone error would take away any momentum the Cyclones had from some of the big defensive plays made behind Moore. Iowa State dropped Game 2 with a final score of 6-2. Now we take it back to the desk for Insiders on ISU TV.
And again, well done, Mary. So, guys, let's talk about this series as a whole. Obviously, we had a decent amount of coverage there. Zach there on Friday, you there on Sunday. As they didn't play on Saturday due to a cancellation, postponed it to Sunday, had a doubleheader on Sunday. So let's start off on Friday. Obviously, not the best way Iowa State could have started really any game ever. That was probably the perfect storm of a bad start. Talk about it briefly, Zach.
Yeah, well, the biggest problem at first is Walbacher couldn't find the zone. She put a few on, and then the illegal pitches brought 2 runs home.
Yep.
That was a really rough start for the Cyclones there. Then the Red Raiders just started putting their bat on the ball, and
Absolutely.
a couple errors in the field. I think we had 3 in the first inning there. So that put the Cyclones in a tough spot. After the first inning, however, they battled. And I think a little bit of the first inning was just the jitters from the young team. It's a team with 5 freshmen, 6 sophomores. 3 of them were starting, they were freshmen.
Sure, yeah.
So I think that was a little bit of it, just being their first Big 12 home opener.
Yeah.
I think the jitters were there, but they started competing as
For sure, yeah. You could see that it could be potentially some jitters. Obviously, first time competing at home under this new regime in the Jamie Traxel era. The first time competing against a Big 12 foe for this squad. It was not the best weather out there, so
Right.
a lot of conditions went into this, and it was the perfect storm. And Texas Tech came into this this series. Offense was clicking. It was really their pitching and their defense that was letting them down in some of these games. Came in on a 3-game losing streak, but their offense was firing on all cylinders, and it did not help that they were able to get adjusted to that because of the play of Walbacher on in the circle. Those 3 illegal pitches right off the bat put runners on and then brought the first runner around, and from then the floodgates opened. Had Savannah Sanders in there for just basically a couple pitches before she let up a walk and then a couple of hits. Then brought in Emma Hyland, and she seemed to settle things down after that. Talk about her performance, Zach, in Game 1. Like you said, after that first inning, able to kind of settle things down for Iowa State and get a competitive game minus the first inning.
Yeah, she threw strikes, and for the most part, she gave her fielders easier plays. There were
Yes.
still a couple mishaps, but they're easier ground balls to field, pop-ups to field and such. But bottom line, she threw strikes, but she wasn't, throwing it right over the plate. She just, overall, she started painting the corners a little better than the previous 2 pitchers.
For sure.
And it really helped the Cyclones defensively. And then offensively, it kind of sparked them a little bit, I think, too.
Yeah, a little bit. And you had some performances on the offensive end that stuck out in this game, regardless of the final score that was so wayside. Talk about some highlights for Iowa State's offense in this first home game of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest highlight for them was freshman Taylon Lewis, who was accountable for all 4 runs that the Cyclones did score. She had 2 RBIs, 2 runs, had a double. She's a freshman, so the Cyclones have a lot to be excited about there with other freshmen in their lineup as well. I also thought McFarland was really good, and she's been great this year so far, batting .419. She's one of the biggest leaders for this team, the junior. And as well as she's hitting the ball right now, I mean, right now she's got to be considered as an all-Big 12 player. I'd say.
For sure, yeah. She came into that series with a .444 batting average, which led the Big 12 at that time, dropped since that in that series, but definitely someone that Iowa State is confident with at the plate. But regardless, a rough start to the series. Now, Mary, you were there on Sunday for the start of the doubleheader. Iowa State started that game a lot better than they started this first one. Talk about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, they did get that early run that kind of had them trying to catch up for most of the time, but it was only 1 run, unlike the first game.
Exactly.
But the biggest thing was they did make improvements that they were trying to make, and you saw that they made those improvements right away after the first game, and that continued. And as you can see, that the scores in Game 2 and Game 3 weren't anywhere near Game 1. So I don't think that the overall scores in the series properly relate to how close the games were, other than Game 2 and Game 3. But you did see a couple errors, just as Zach mentioned, in the first game that became a factor in the second game. And that was 2 balls being dropped in the outfield, and that led to 3 runs. One of them didn't lead to a run, but those types of things take out momentum. They get in your head as a team, and the team came out ready. They were very engaged. They were cheering throughout. They felt confident. You can see it when you're sitting in the stands, but unfortunately it didn't translate once again. It's really the pitching on the mound was strong. Brianna Walbacher again hit 8 total strikeouts. She really was able to keep Iowa State in the game, but the offense wasn't clicking, and Taylin Lewis was really the only one to kind of get something going other than those 2 runs in the end, which it was too late. But overall defense was pretty good other than the couple of errors, but in the second game, it was more of a fall in the offense. But they did improve what they needed to improve, and that's why the second game was closer in a 6-2 loss. And then, as we'll talk about right now, the third game was a lot closer.
Yeah, and you mentioned just in that second game, there's an obvious difference. Pitching. Pitching made the difference in this game, and specifically the starting pitcher in Walbacher. In the first game of the series, she only pitched 1 out, and in those had 4 earned runs and 3 walks in that time, and not to mention of those 3 illegal pitches. And then you come to the next game, she bounces back huge. 6-inning pitches, a little shaky start, but she really got better as time went along. Only allowed 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 8 strikeouts. She's a strikeout pitcher, so that's always good to see. The only problem in that towards the end and a little towards the beginning, walked 8 batters. That has been Walbacher's really Achilles heel in her game. Iowa State looks to improve that under new pitching coach Dortel, former Drake product. She's been doing great things. And mentioning great pitching, we moved to game 3 of this series. Probably the best pitching we've seen in this series. Savannah Sanders came out, and she came out firing. Ended that game with 9 strikeouts, only 1 walk, and then did allow 4 runs, but they didn't come till really late in this game when potentially she was against some fatigue there. Yeah, so talk about this game as a whole. Obviously, that one was kind of a heartbreaker for the Cyclones, losing 4-2 after leading for almost, well, they led for all the game except into the top of the 7th inning.
Yeah, that's a tough loss for the Cyclones, but they got to be happy with the way they competed.
Sure.
And I think Texas Tech's a good ball club. I know their record doesn't necessarily reflect it as of right now, but as we've seen this weekend, they could hit the ball, and Sammy Williams was unreal. She had the solo homer in the first inning, and she had a double as well, a fielder choice RBI. Once again, another freshman. So the Cyclones do have a lot to cheer about when it comes to talent in the youth department.
For sure. And what did you take away from that game 3 loss, Mary?
Yeah, overall, I think that the way that they were able to be strong on the mound and defensively was key. But the biggest thing that I see is their offense not matching what they're improving defensively. And until their offense is able to really give them a lead that will solidify the lead throughout, and they don't have to worry about a couple late runs losing the game for them, then that's key. But until they can fix that problem, it's really going to be they almost had it, and kind of like it has been in the beginning of the season.
No, I totally agree. And there were a couple isolated incidents in this game 3 where Iowa State left runners in scoring position, left them stranded. This team cannot do that. Not a very strong offensive team. So whenever you have the opportunity to bring those runners around, especially, I know one instance for sure, you had Sammy Williams with that double on second with no outs, and they could not bring her around, only got her to third. Iowa State needs to capitalize on these different instances if they want to win Big 12 games. But we've got a break from Big 12 action, and the last game here at home before a 2-week stretch on the road against Big 12 opponents coming up tomorrow. You and I will come to town at the Cyclone Sports Complex, weather pending. So what do you expect out of the Cyclones in this non-conference game, Mary?
Yeah, I expect them to continue what they've been doing. Now that they're not going to be playing a team like Texas Tech, they're going to be able to maybe capitalize more on what they've been improving. It's really going to be a matter of if they show up offensively and if their pitching is on, because we've seen best of both worlds. And like you said about Walbacher, her Achilles heel has been a big factor since their offense isn't up to par. So really, things kind of have to be perfect on the mound, and then they have to clean things up. But I think, like you said, weather pending. The weather might be a factor. We're expecting a lot of rain this week, so if that does become a factor, hopefully we won't see it translate in their game. But overall, I think they have a pretty good chance against the Panthers.
What do you think, Zach?
I agree. I think it all starts on the mound. Walbacher's got to throw strikes, especially with this young team. When you walk batters, I think that puts the fielders in a situation to where they're waiting around and errors are more likely to
And where
happen.
3 out of your 4 infielders are freshmen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like you said, they're all young. So, and I think that's what Sanders did so well in that game 3 is she didn't walk any batters, so she didn't put her defense in any really scary positions, I should say, or make them like stand around and wait, because that was the biggest problem that first inning in game 1 is there was so much waiting around. The first inning was like 35 minutes long, and that's when the errors start to pile up. So I think as long as they don't walk anybody and they play good in the field, I think their lineup's gonna get it going this week. I think they're gonna take the Panthers down.
For sure. We'll wait and see for that. If you want live coverage of that game, make sure to tune into Cyclones.tv. Tomorrow, that will be a 4 o'clock first pitch from the Cyclone Sports Complex. We're going to take a quick break. Come back. We're going to preview some Iowa State football here on Cyclone InCYders.
When I was a young boy, my father took me into the city to see a marching band. He said,
Tune into the midweek roundup with me, your host Michael Morrell.
I'm Jacob Lee.
We are going to talk about all sorts of things like baseball, or even debate the fact that the Vikings are going to finish third in the NFC North this year.
They're going to win the North again this year.
Tim Weeman, host of the Sound of the Storm.
Connor Ferguson.
Hunter Smith.
Talk about all college sports and NFL, MLB, and our Storm is definitely brewing.
I'm Blake Akery, and I'm the host of Sports View.
And I'm TJ Reed.
We talk college basketball and NBA.
And all things Iowa State.
Tim Weeman.
Patrick Stanek.
Hank Zimmerman.
Tune into the weekend pregame as we warm up the sports weekend ahead, including many segments with Pick'ems and Tim's Trivia.
I'm Taylor Mankle.
I'm Mary Rominger.
I'm Andre Safar.
And I'm Joey Mullins.
And we talk a lot of different sports here, including
NHL and Cyclone hockey.
World football.
American football.
basketball, and many other segments. Make sure to step into the Clone Zone.
I'm Michael Mainzer.
I'm Mary Rominger.
I'm Dylan Ryan.
And I'm Zach Williamson.
And this is Cyclone Talk. Listen in for live interviews and analysis from these guys.
Back on Cyclone InCYders, Taylor Mankle, now along with Ben Olson and Hawn Wong, back on the program here, and we're going to talk some football. It's not the season right now, but we've got a lot to preview for this team with a lot of questions for this year. But something that is coming up April 8th, the Iowa State football spring game. That'll be at 1 p.m. in Jack Trice Stadium. You can check that out. We'll have coverage right here on ISU TV and Cyclone InCYders, so make sure to stay tuned for all of that. So first, we've got a lot of questions this offseason. I think one that is highlighted above everything else is Joel Lanning. What is Joel Lanning? Joel Lanning will be moving over, switching to linebacker, and it looks like on the depth chart right now, he's going to be starting at that Mike linebacker position. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Man scoring touchdowns just months ago for Iowa State. Now, crushing some skulls at the linebacker position.
Yeah, it's great to see that Iowa State's got a guy with so much talent that you can just almost spin the wheel and play him wherever you want. I was reading, Lanning has not played linebacker since the 8th grade, and I'm going to say the Big 12 is a little bit tougher competition.
Maybe.
And
he's got some intense peewees, man.
So you know, it'll be fun to see. The coaches are saying that he's making really good strides if they have him listed as #1 on the depth chart. So, I mean, I also would have liked to see Joel Lanning on the offensive side because we saw what a threat he was.
Sure.
And in the Big 12, I think it helps if you can have a bruising runner. So, I mean, I wouldn't rule out seeing Joel Lanning on both sides of the ball if I was the coaches.
Do you think that's out of the question, Hawn, seeing him on both sides?
Oh, definitely not. Like you said, being able to spin that wheel per se, just that versatility on either side of the ball. We saw him be able to show his physical side last year. Really kind of that bulldog mentality that does work as a linebacker. But last year, he lowered the shoulder. He ran into defenders. You usually see quarterbacks wanting to slide more often, avoid getting hurt. You know, you're kind of the cornerstone of an offense. But for Joel Lanning, that really wasn't the case. He really wanted to get in there, show he can play in the Big 12, and just get those extra yards for his team. So I think moving that kind of mentality over to the linebackers, it really shows toughness, and it balances out.
Exactly. He looked like a linebacker at the quarterback position. So it kind of makes that transition, and it also helps that Iowa State's linebacker core is probably the weakest it's ever been. So that might be why he's going to be starting right now. I'm very anxious to see how he performs at this position. Running into somebody and wrapping up and tackling is a totally different thing. So we'll see how Joel Lanning processes with that. Hopefully we'll see him for the first time on the spring game on April 8th. Now, speaking of that, Iowa State very thin at linebacker. What do you guys think going into this season, Hawn, is the weakest position for the Cyclones?
Yeah, well, with Iowa State, we saw a little bit last year, and you're going to see a little bit more this year with the offensive line. We do have a starter coming back, Julian Good-Jones. He did start.
And Jake Campos will come back.
And he did come back, but he didn't start any games last year. So we will see his adjustment from taking a whole year off. And I am excited to see because he will have kind of that leadership role for this offensive line. But other than that, we see a lot of we see some transfer coming in, and then just some freshmen who are intriguing for this offensive line to kind of work with. And kind of along with that point, with the offensive line being the weakest point, you can kind of put the tight end there a little bit because he is situated on the line. I'm just going to add in the tight end spot for the Cyclones has been a little bit weak these past 2 years, and I'm excited to see if a tight end can emerge out of the spring practices to help not only offensive line but offense in general, passing catches, distracting the defense, whatnot.
Yeah, what was it? Like 2 years ago, they had a total of about 5 receptions.
I just saw the stat today. The past 2 seasons, Iowa State has had 12 receptions from tight ends.
the tight end position. So do you think that's their weakest position, or do you think something else, man?
I think that the tight end position is the biggest question mark heading into the season, as you got a lot of young guys, but some pretty highly touted recruits, maybe some 4-stars, I think. So, and those guys were redshirted, so it'll be interesting to see what they can do this season. And I think you have to look at the offensive line as the weakest because I feel like that was the weakest position last year. But at the same time, the defensive line is another question mark. And I know a lot of coaches look at the defensive line needs to be established before the team can really start to see success. So I think there's more recruits in the defensive line, which puts them just above the offensive line. But I agree that I think the offense is our weakest point in the spring right now.
And sticking with you, Ben, what's the strongest position for Iowa State?
I'm going to go wide receiver position for Iowa State. You look at Alan Lazard, the senior leader. I mean, expect a huge year out of him. So, but also at the same time, Deshaunte Jones had a sneaky good freshman season last year, so I expect him to take a bigger role. Hopefully we don't see a sophomore slump like we did out of Mike Warren, and I want to see him continue to progress, and the wide receivers are really huge for our offensive success.
Yeah, absolutely. You've still got Trevor Ryan coming back, Hakeem Butler coming back as well, Carson Epps, Denver Johnson all get time. So what do you think is the strongest position for Iowa State?
I was going to go with the wide receivers, listing all the names you have there. The most intriguing to me, Deshaunte Jones. Just his flashes of being just that speed guy on the outside
versatile,
for Iowa State. Really versatile, just aggressive yet kind of swift and smooth. But just to switch things up a little bit, the running backs for Iowa State, last year showed a lot of versatility as well. Speaking of 2 years ago, you said Mike Warren had a little bit of sophomore slump last year. 2 years ago, 1,000-yard rusher. He showed a lot of promise. Last year, David Montgomery really stepped up for the Cyclones, battling for yards. And Kene Nwangu, he was really in the mix until he faced a little bit of injury problems. But with all three of them healthy for this spring and then this coming year, I'm really excited to see what they can do.
Yeah, and you've got Sheldon Crowney Jr. will probably get some time this year, especially. We'll see where Kene Nwangu is because of that injury that he had in the off season, but we'll see where he's at towards the start of the season. Hopefully he will be playing for Iowa State, but I totally agree with you. That's a sneaky position, especially because when Mike Warren was the best, when nobody was looking for him, his freshman season, it's kind of back towards that rationale. Nobody's looking out for Mike Warren right now.
And we were talking about it earlier, the possibility for Joel Lanning to become a sort of runner for the Cyclones.
Like a wildcat.
We saw
thing,
last year, he was, I think, third on the team in yards, rushing yards. So that alone is a weapon in itself, along with, I think, the 5 listed running backs we just had on the team.
I could even see Joel Lanning jumping in at the tight end position if we need some leadership there. You know, he could be a good blocker with his physicality, but he's athletic enough. He could go out and make some catches as well.
Yeah.
And you guys, we've brought up both of these implementations towards the game, but who needs to have a better spring, the O-line or the D-line for Iowa State? We'll start with you, Ben.
So we've just been talking about all the offensive threats that Iowa State has, so I'm going to go with, I think the offensive line needs to have a better spring. And the defensive line is just as important, but they have more recruits coming in, it feels like, and the offensive line is still going to be very inexperienced. It'll be really nice to get Campos back, but it'll be just like last year where they're replacing 4 starters on the offensive line.
That's huge, yeah.
So I know that Manning is an incredible offensive line coach, so I'm really excited to see what he can continue to do with another year at Iowa State. So I think they really need to take a big step this spring.
And what do you think, Hawn?
Yeah, I'm going to actually look the other way on this one, because if you do look at the team last year for the Cyclones, the offensive line kind of looked in a similar shape, I should say, to this coming year. They aren't great at any position, but they have decent positions at the starters. Depth will be a problem with almost any team in college. You know, at offensive line, they get injured a lot. But with Iowa State, they have a decent line up front, and even with having a decent line last year, I think they put up historic numbers for a Cyclone offense. So with that being said, I think the defensive side of the ball, especially at line, will kind of look to step up this year, because if you look at it, Jaquan Bailey had a really good year, but he kind of thrived being next to some senior leadership on the outsides there. So this year, looking to step up, we have transfers coming in. Ray Lima, Ozzy, Matt Leo, big guy. I'm really excited to see what he can do. A little raw, but then again, he'll have his moments.
No, for sure. And now, obviously, not a very successful season last year for Iowa State football. So give me something, just give me one thing that you want to highlight that needs to change if Iowa State is going to be more successful this year, Hawn.
For me, it's just kind of the consistency, not only just overall play, but the consistency within kind of the players' depth, I should say. We saw the change up in quarterbacks from the 2-quarterback system last year between Park and Lanning. And while it did have its moments, I would have just liked to see one of the quarterbacks emerge last year and take that ball with them, which is looking like this year Jacob Park will have that key. Other than that, we did see a little bit of shake up in the linebacker position with last year. Also, the running back, Mike Warren, not having a great year. So with this year, I think just having that consistency with knowing who the starters will be, knowing who the team leaders will be, will really help this team kind of generate some momentum to get over that 3-9 hump.
Sure. And what do you think, would you like to highlight, Ben, on what Iowa State needs to do better?
I look at last season and I see a lot of, I think this team needs to start being able to, when they make a mistake, forget about it and continue to keep playing instead of continue a downward spiral of mistakes and maybe get behind. I feel like that's sort of a hangover from the end of the Rhodes era, where you see like last year's Thursday Oklahoma game or the Baylor game, where they are in these games against competitive teams, good teams. And then they'll make an interception or maybe give up a 4th down conversion. And then it goes on. Next thing you know, Iowa State's down by 10. I feel like they need to be, like Hawn said, more consistent and persistent in their play. and be able to be that successful team that can overcome obstacles.
And now, going along with that, what are your expectations for this year, Ben? Don't give me a record, just what are your expectations in words? Because we'll get to that next.
Bowl game. You look at the seniors on this team, Alan Lazard, Joel Lanning. I think these guys need to get to a bowl game.
Okay. What are your expectations, Hawn?
Oh, I would love to see a bowl game, but I don't know about that coming in this year. As a second-year head coach, we're going to see a lot of. I think we're going to see some new things come out of Campbell, like you said, coming out of the hangover from Paul Rhodes. Campbell kind of, I wouldn't say he struggled, but you kind of have to take things slow, adapting to a new team. But with this now that he has a full grasp with, Iowa State, Ames, and whatnot, being solidified as, the coach.
Yeah, first full year.
Yeah, full year. I think we'll see a lot of improvement. That's what I'll just say. A lot of improvement. But I don't know about that.
I agree. Asking a bowl game from Campbell in his second season is a lot, but when I say that, I'm looking more at the players than the coaches.
Yes, definitely.
So it'll just be interesting.
All right, then let's do this. We're going to run through the lineup of the schedule, and I want each of you to tell me win, loss, or whatever. All right? So we're going to start off September 2nd, Saturday, home opener, UNI.
I think we take that one back. Iowa State, it really hurt them last year watching that game unfold. So.
Okay, Dub?
They better win it. Dub.
Okay, keep on your hands how many you got here. We're going to see how many wins you guys have the Cyclones taken. All right, next home game, September 9th against the Hawkeyes of Iowa.
The Hawkeyes, I didn't watch too much of them last year. I just know they didn't have that 16-0 season they did 2 years ago. But I still do think they are physical enough to take Iowa State in most situations.
All right, so he's got an L.
This game's in Ames, I believe. I'm gonna go ahead and say a little 2-0 start.
All right.
Okay, 2-0. All right, next they travel to Akron, play the Zips.
I like the Iowa State's non-conference schedule this year, and this being one of them, I'm going to give them a W here.
Okay, on the road?
I'll give them a W as well.
Okay.
3-0.
3-0.
3-0. So next, Iowa State hosts Big 12 opener against Texas on the 28th of September.
W.
W.
I can't go 4-0. I'll say that's an L.
All right, 3-1.
Texas will be on the upcoming with Herman.
Yeah.
Coach
All
Herman.
right, so we got 3-1 for the both of you. Next, they travel to Oklahoma on the 7th of October.
I'll tell you now, Baker Mayfield is my pick for Heisman. I think he really wants it this year. He had a lot of devastating losses last year, not being able to get into the final.
Yeah, the
bowl game.
playoff.
But, yeah. So I think he just takes it easy.
Decimates.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Especially at Norman.
Make it another year of the lots that Iowa State has not won at Oklahoma. So that's an L.
For sure. Next, back home against Kansas.
Oh, give us Kansas.
This is a W.
Give us Kansas.
It's a W.
Yep.
All right. So what do you guys have? 4-2 apiece.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Next.
Different pass of getting
Yeah,
there.
different pass, but 4-2 apiece. Next, travel to Lubbock, Texas. The Mahomes List Red Raiders on the 21st of October.
Yeah, I was just going to say they lost their quarterback. I'm not sure who's coming in, but regardless, they put up some points. So let's give it to Texas Tech.
Texas Tech?
I'm going to take a W for the Cyclones
right.
in this one. I think Texas Tech is on the downward slide.
5-2, 4-3. Next, homecoming, October 28th against TCU.
Let's move to 4-4.
4-4.
Yeah,
homecoming.
Iowa State doesn't play well on homecoming.
5-3. Okay. Next, travel to West Virginia on the 4th of November.
Morgantown's a tough place for Iowa State to win again. Let's go 5-5.
5-5.
I'm there as well. Actually, I think I'm
5-4.
4-6.
4-6.
4-6 for Hawn, 5-5 for Ben.
there you go.
Last home game is Okie State on the 11th of November.
Cyclones will take the last home game. That's a W.
So that's the 6th win. That's the
Yep.
bowl game.
That is.
Bowl winner right there.
Against the best team in the Big 12.
They've been on the brink of an upset how many times against Oklahoma State? They're going to get one.
The L.
This is the big upset of the year.
So this is the next installment of the miracle of Jack Trice.
Yep.
If it's a night game, maybe I'll give you that, but it's not like on a Friday or anything, so I don't know about that. But that's the bowl win there. You move to 4-6.
4-7.
4-7. Yep, 4-7. Now we go at Baylor.
Baylor, it should be a game Iowa State can win, but I'm going to go ahead and give them an L on this one.
Yeah, I will as well.
And then wrap up the season in Manhattan, Kansas on November 25th.
That's 5 wins for the Cyclones. Mark it down.
Mark it down.
6-6 season for the Cyclones. Mark it down.
6-6 season. All right, so I take it they won't be making the Big 12 championship for either of you. But regardless, all right, we've finished with 6-6 and 5-7 for the Iowa State Cyclones. So improvements being seen from both of these. We will see as only time will tell. Spring game, once again, coming up April 8th, so make sure to check that out. But that's all we have time for here on Cyclone InCYders. For Zach Williamson and Mary Rominger, along with Hawn, Wong, and Ben Olson, I'm Taylor Mankle, wishing you all a peaceful good night.